guys, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about my January haul, and I wanted this up a lot earlier, like late January, but you know, things kind of happen and you can't film, so here we are. So let's just kind of get into it. Well, as you guys know, January was a reread month for me. I needed to recharge both like my ability to read new novels as well as like help me get back into the writing mood, and it actually really did help. But the first two books were actually from the same author, and it's a poetry collection, and that is Milk and Honey and The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. Now, I ended up giving Milk and Honey a 5 out of 5 stars. I found that I had a lot more I could relate more to the stuff in this poetry collection. A lot more of the emotions were there for me. I found myself tearing up and crying a little bit while I was reading it. And I definitely think that if you are in the right mindset to deal with things such as like assault, breakups, healing, all that kind of stuff, that this is a good book or like poetry collection for you to pick up. It's very emotional. She gets really down to the nitty-gritty, and I think Rupi Kaur was one of the first few poets that are starting to get me back into reading poetry for fun and not for school and dreading every minute of it. And then as for The Sun and Her Flowers, I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. While I did still enjoy this collection, I felt that sometimes her points kind of dragged a little bit in this one. I wasn't feeling it as much, if that makes sense. And I kind of felt like especially some of her longer works, like the ones that were like 2 or 3 pages long, it felt like it dragged on. I couldn't see the point in it. I would recommend it because of the topics that are still kind of tackled here. It's still very emotional, still very much like the healing process and everything, but I do think that in comparison to the rest of the books or her previous collection, this one is not one of my favorites, but still definitely enjoyed it. The next book that I ended up reading in January was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and I will link up my original review, if I remember, somewhere down below or in the cards. As usual, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I adore more accurate depictions of Greek mythology. Truly, I think that this one was no exception. It's a beautifully lyrical novel. We see a lot of, well, actually, you guys don't know, there's an Achilles retelling where we see the world through Patroclus's eyes. I said that correctly. And we see kind of their progression from children to adults, as well as their romantic relationship. And yes, they are in fact gay. They're not brothers or cousins or best friends. They are very gay. And even though I knew it was going to happen, I know the myth fairly well. I also know I've read this book already, so I knew it was going to happen, but still, I felt it was still very heartbreaking for me, and I was sobbing by the end of it, and I don't know why I decided to pick this up in January to start off my year, you know. Let's start off the new year by crying. The next book I actually read was an audiobook, and that is Animal Cemetery by Stephen King. And if you guys don't know, Animal Cemetery is this entire family moves to, I believe, a place in Maine, as most of Stephen King's novels tend to take place in, and they realize that there's an animal cemetery that does more than just like be a place to bury their pets, and kind of pose with the question is dead better? So yeah. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I felt this was one of Stephen King's, true to his words about Animal Cemetery. Animal Cemetery. This was actually a very terrifying read. I felt that it posed the question, what would we do if we had the ability to bring people back from life? I loved Michael C. Hall's narration of it. There were certain aspects of it that terrified me, and certain things I didn't need to hear, like a small child doing what that small child did. So kudos to Michael C. Hall. I love this book. It's definitely going to be one of my favorite Stephen King books to read and go back to. Definitely will be picking up the physical copy sometime soon. But the next book that I read in January is Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. This is told in letters, epistolarian style, I believe is how you would pronounce it. And we follow Charlie throughout his freshman year of high school as he kind of makes friends and learn all about his life, and kind of deals with heavy topics. So I would give this a major trigger warning for alcohol use, drug use, sexual assault, physical violence, depression, and suicide. However, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. It's a wonderful coming-of-age story that I tend to liken toward Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, only different aspects, and I do believe that this deserves all the hype that it has. As someone who has reread this book several times over, it definitely deals with the kind of signs of depression in young men as well as sexual assault that I think that aren't very much covered in any kind of literature. And it doesn't sugarcoat it, it doesn't make it pretty, it's very nitty gritty, and I think that I relate to Charlie in a lot of ways, and a lot of ways that I think even scare me. So definitely highly recommend if you are ready, but like I said, definite trigger warning on this book because it is very, very heavy if you're not ready. Oh, and there even is some homophobia in this. So, like I said, just be really wary, and if you're not ready for it or don't think you're ready for it, don't pick it up. But if you feel like you might want to tread into that kind of territory and you feel like you are ready to tackle such heavy topics, feel free to do so. And the last 3 books that I read in January is actually part of a major trilogy, or now a series. As you guys know, I love these characters. So that is Court of Thorn and Roses, Court of Mist and Fury, and A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. And since these are all kind of heavy and really thick, I'm going to just hold up the last one. Well, actually, I have to hold up all 3 of them. Just kidding. Just kidding. So, for A Court of Thorn and Roses, if you guys don't know, the series follows Feyre, who is a human girl who lives along beneath the wall where the rest of the fairies live up north. And then one day she goes out to hunt and ends up killing a wolf, only to find out that said wolf is a fairy, and in order to pay back a debt that she ultimately started, she has to now live with the fairy of the Spring Court. And this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I ended up giving this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I thought that this was a wonderful way. Sarah J. Maas has this way of doing retellings where you still see the bare bones of the story, like you know where the story goes, how it plans out, but there's still so much like she adds to her own twists, and her characters are so wonderfully fleshed out. I adored every moment of it. I never noticed how toxic Tamlin was, mainly until I reread through the books, mainly because we see everything through Feyre's eyes. I think that she does well of romanticizing that like notion of a toxic relationship and not being able to see it until the end of the day. However, I will get more into that in my Goodreads review because that is treading on spoilers. If you guys don't know, this is a reread, so any books that I have, these 3 books in particular, if I spoil it, I apologize. This is like my second time rereading them, and I just love the characters, and I can't help to spoil it, so. But honestly, Rhysand has my heart, and I want him all the happiness from this book. He just seems like such an unhappy little duckling, or an unhappy little bat, and I want nothing but the greatest thing for him, honestly. As for A Court of Mist and Fury, this takes place, I think, 2 or 3 months directly after the events of A Court of Thorn and Roses. I also gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. This is my favorite book out of the trilogy. Sarah J. Maas's sequels, like her second books and all of her series that I've read thus far, have always managed to put me on, like, to twist everything that I have figured out, to make me question everything, and honestly, I adore it. I love the twists here, and I love how it went from Beauty and the Beast to Hades and Persephone. So, and I'm just digging all the characterization. I love the characters she introduced. They're all so much, so fleshed out. They all have their own traumas and their own ways of dealing with it. And I loved how they helped out Feyre along the way. Honestly, I cannot get enough of this book, and I want to reread it for the rest of my life. And I want several copies of this book, and I want it signed. I want pictures of the inner circle pasted in random pages. I just, like, if Sarah J. Maas ever does a thing like Cassandra Clare did with Queen of Air and Darkness, where she has like pictures inserted between pages, I would buy all of them, like literally from the first book to the last, and probably what's it called, Throne of Glass. Literally would buy it. Now for the last book, I ended up, this takes place I think almost a year after the event of the second book, and I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. While I did highly enjoy this book, and it's a wonderful way to kind of wrap up this portion of the story, I felt like it was missing some things, if that makes sense. I didn't feel like certain things were fleshed out. I think that she could have used more page time, which is surprising that she didn't. Maybe it's just how the book is. But I think that more page time, about like more or less about the same amount that Akomath had, would have done so well, because there were some parts that still need to be fleshed out, and I know that there's another series coming, so it'll still be, you know, expanded upon, and I'm very excited. However, the biggest thing that kind of bothered me was the lack of lead up to a certain character's sexuality. We learn in the second book there wasn't much of that lead up at all. We figured that she was going to end up with another character that we all love and adore, and it turns out to not go that way. And I felt like Sarah J. Maas might have felt particularly pressured to have more LGBT rep in said novel, even though we do get that from the other minor characters in there, which I didn't have much. Like, I would have loved a LGBT character to be a main character, but I was okay with having the knowledge that this world at least has LGBT characters and they are accepted in this said world. And I feel like the lack of lead up to said character's sexuality and that big reveal kind of ruined the overall reading for me, and it felt very forced and very rushed, and it's just one of those things that I rereading cringe because I don't think it was done well. Slight tangent, I also hate how the fandom relegates, or kind of, I don't want to say relegate because it's like downgrading, but kind of pushes her to be, this character to be strictly homosexual, liking only the same gender, when I believe in this book, yes, this said character mentions how they find pleasure from both men and women, but also only find romantic and intimate conversations with those of the same gender, and I feel like that was kind of shut to the side by a lot of the fandom, and it really upsets me because I think it's very vague how the character's sexuality is, which is another thing that bothers me. So I think that was the biggest thing for me, aside from the overall need to be fleshed out a bit more. But yeah, hopefully that gets rectified in the future books and we see more of that rather than how this was handled, because that was not very well. But that is it for my January wrap up. If I bust through some of these things, I am sorry. Like I said, I do have other things to do today, and somehow my time frame to film videos just got really shrunken down. So yeah, but until then, if you guys want more of my thoughts, I will be leaving all my Goodreads reviews for these guys or any videos that I have done down below, or you can leave me a comment. Make sure to say that there will be spoilers in that said thread so we can avoid that, or you can find me on my multiple of social media, again down below, to talk to me about any of these guys. But if you like these videos, hit like, subscribe. I upload twice a week, once every Sunday, and then wherever else in the week that I can find. And I hope you guys have a great week, or have had a great week. Until next time, I'll talk to you guys everywhere else. Bye!